The reason that I called this press conference is there's a lot of concern, not only in the state of Florida, but across the country with these threats to our communities with, in schools, both shootings and different types of threats being posted on social media and different platforms that are getting at least the folks in Clay County concerned enough to reach out to the sheriff's office. And I wanted to make sure that we pushed out some information to them live, not only written but live, so that they could have their questions answered. And I got a list of questions that we've gotten from the community here in Clay County by way of social media, and I'll actually go through those questions, and they might answer some of the questions that the media may have. And I wanted to leverage our partnership with the media to make sure that we're getting the word out, not only to the folks in Clay County, but the folks in the viewing audience from Northeast Florida. And so I'll read some of the questions and give some of the facts around these responses. One question: what threat has the Clay County Sheriff's Office been dealing with since the Parkland shooting? And why these threats now? Since Valentine's Day of this year, we've had 11 threats here in Clay County, 11. And, the person asks why the threats now. We have people who want to be copycats, you have hoax type posts, and people just want to know that something that they did caused an effect or a large law enforcement response. That's my only assumption on that piece. I can't speak for an individual who would do such a thing. We have had, like I said, 11 threats since February 14th, and none of them have risen to the level where elements of a crime existed and we can pinpoint the individual who made those threats. So, it's the stand of the Clay County Sheriff's Office and me particularly, if a person makes a threat of that nature to do harm to our children, which I think are some of the most valuable assets that we have in our communities, and in Clay County they comprise a third of our community, a third of our population. And with that being said, it's the posture of the Clay County Sheriff's Office to do everything that we can to ensure the safety and security of our children, just like we would with the adults and everyone else in the community. It's always been a push of this administration to ensure that we had a law enforcement presence in all of our schools. In fact, last year, once we took office, we did a push to get school resource officers in the junior high schools, because as it stands, they are only in our high schools. Now, on any given day, there's a law enforcement presence in or around our schools. That's always going to be a priority of our operations area, but I want dedicated resources for all of our schools. My kid is an adult, but I have a grandkid who's going to be of age where she's going to be in a Clay County school. We have folks in the viewing audience who have kids in high school, kids in junior high school, kids in elementary school, and they want to know, by way of these social media questions, they want to know, hey, what's being done to keep my kids safe? And those are fair questions. It's always a priority of the Clay County Sheriff's Office to make sure that our kids are held in safe care within the schools. We have a good partnership with the school system here in Clay County. We vet every threat and take every threat seriously. There is no idle threat. We will not sit on our laurels if a threat comes in and we just declare it to be a hoax. If we know that it's a hoax, for sure, we still may go that extra mile to ensure that we enhance the presence of law enforcement, even to the detriment of the budget. And I hate to say that we'll blow the budget, but you know what? If I'm going to blow the budget on any one item, it's certainly going to be for the safety and welfare of our children. So I move on to the next question. How can we confirm that our children will be safe when attending school in Clay County? Well, you can never confirm that your kid is going to be safe in any school or any setting. There's threats that exist both in school and outside of schools, but we take every effort, every step that we can as law enforcement and the protectors of our children to make sure that they have the safest environment to learn in. And again, with that partnership with the school system, we do all we can to ensure that. Another question that I see here: has the Clay County Sheriff's Office received threats previously to our local schools in the 2017-18 year? Well, in 2017, we received 4. And there was a 14-year-old who was arrested in 2017 for making bomb threats. And that's a second-degree felony. So when these kids make these idle threats, or if they're realized threats, understand that there are laws that govern, laws that govern those types of threats. Specifically, we arrest people or look to arrest folks for interfering with a school function. That's a misdemeanor of second degree. That's Florida Statute 877.13. Again, 877.13. Written threats to do harm, which is a second degree felony. That's Florida Statute 836.10. And then there's bomb threats and threats like to do shootings, which is also a second degree felony, and that's Statute 790.164. And I didn't get anybody else to write these notes for me. These are my notes, and I wanted to make sure that I got the most accurate information to push out to our community. So here's what I have to say to our kids. If you see something, it sounds cliche, if you see something, say something. Listen, if you see a post and it makes you feel uneasy, share that with your parent. Share that with somebody in authority, or share that with law enforcement or an administrator at school. Don't just sit by and say, oh, this isn't real, because you just don't know. And now we've traced some hoaxes back to, or false information back to, way back to the Soviet Union. You know, the chances of, and I said this today, the chances of somebody from the Soviet Union coming to Clay County and doing something to our kids, highly unlikely, but possible. So what did we do? We enhanced our presence at all of our schools, just in case, because you never know. And I don't want to take any chances when it comes to our children. To the parents, it's time for parents to be parents. It's time for parents not to be friends with their children. Have those conversations about, this is a real life issue. These are real life situations that are going on across the country and in the state of Florida. It's time for children to hear from the authority in the house and talk about these hard conversations and find out what's going on in the heads of their children. Let them know the legalities or illegalities of making certain threats, and be the parent. We set parameters as parents about other things. It's time to set parameters about things like this. You know, and this just, you know, it sickens me to think that somebody would think it's a game to put out a post, an email, an Instagram post, or any other kind of social media platform post that would make a threat to do anything in any of our schools, not only in just Clay County, but Northeast Florida. So I'll say this, and I take a firm hand on those things, and we'll have a zero tolerance policy when it comes to things like that. You know, if your kid or you or somebody in this viewing audience thinks it's cute to do that, we'll arrest you if we find out it's you, and no bones about it. You will go to jail. And you say, oh, you know, poor little Timmy doesn't need to go to jail. Well, poor little Timmy doesn't need to be making threats to the other kids. Are there threats out there to our children on a day-to-day basis? Yes. You know, one person sent in a question that says, why doesn't the Clay County Sheriff's Office inform parents of the outcome of hoaxes and these different posts? Because we don't want people running around paranoid. There's always some threat at some point. And I know there's a lot of talk about gun control. There's a lot of talk about things that have been in play for many, many years. You know, I asked my general counsel, I said, you know, how long has the law been in place, and he's sitting out in the audience, how long has the law been in place that governs the age, the minimum age for a person to legally be able to purchase a weapon? It's been a long, long time, and as long as I can remember. And so with that in mind, for a law to exist for decades that would allow an 18-year-old person or older to legally purchase certain firearms, why all of a sudden do we now find ourselves as a society in a posture where our kids are being threatened with violence of that nature? It doesn't go back, and this is my humble opinion, this is Darrell Daniels speaking, it doesn't go back to firearms, it goes back to an individual. And when do we as a society not hold people accountable for their actions and not blame it on any particular thing? Now, there are some people out there suffering with things like mental illness, and that is the buzzword of the day. You know, there are folks walking around us on any given moment of time that are suffering from a variety of disorders and ailments, but they're functional, and they don't go to schools and shoot people or hurt people. So as the sheriff of Clay County, I just wanted to make it clear to not only the parents, but the folks in the viewing audience that, you know, we're concerned about our children. The children are our priority here. And we'll do everything, and we'll continue to do everything to, one, take these threats seriously when they surface up, but also take action against those who would make false posts. If we can find out who it is, and I will go to any length I can through our intelligence area to get to the bottom of these threats, we'll arrest them, if at all possible. And I will leverage every relationship I have in the state and the federal government to make sure that we're tracing down everything that we can to mitigate this kind of activity. So I have a host of people up here. Any one of these guys can take on a question, and they may be answering some of the questions that you may have. So I'll open up the floor now to my media partners, bless you, and take questions. Yes?
Sheriff Daniel Lorena with Action News Jax. Were any of these threats that you received, whether it was from last week or the 2017-2018 school year, credible?
No, there were none that were credible. And that's the thing, you know, these kids, and these were all children, and I can make this information available to you. It's you know, it's not nothing that's held in secret. And in fact, let's make sure that we make this information. I don't care if you give them copies of what I have right here. Let's get this information in the hands of the media, and then you can do with it what you want to do with it.
I also have a follow-up question.
Yes.
Recently, today, I believe it just came out that the sheriff down in Broward County, Scott Israel, is going to allow his deputies to carry AR-15s on school grounds. Would that be something that you would consider?
In other words, arming them to walk around, like the SROs walking around with AR-15s?
Correct.
Well, my SROs already have AR-15s. They make the decision whether or not to arm themselves with that. That's a discretionary thing that they have at their disposal at any given time. And they, as well as folks in patrol and detectives and some of my command staff, there are folks in all areas of this agency who carry what we call long guns. And we make the decision as individuals when we want to deploy those. Do I want to set a thing in place where it looks like a police state? Absolutely not. I don't want our kids feeling like they have to be in the presence of that type of artillery to keep them safe, because you know, we enjoy a lot of luxuries here in Northeast Florida. We don't have that type of violence in our schools. So am I going to set a tone where my guys are walking around with long guns? That's not what I want. What I want is the kids to be able to go to school, have good interactions with law enforcement, and be in an environment where it's safe and secure, that they can learn and be the future of society like they're supposed to be, like we expect them to be. Yes, ma'am.
Sheriff Elizabeth with Channel 4. I know you mentioned arresting people who make these threats, but for those who might not really truly understand the severity of the consequences, can you go a little bit more in depth? Other than an arrest, how could this affect them and the rest of their life? Well,
you know, it's a fair question on what could be the long-lasting outcomes for being arrested for making these types of threats. You know, a misdemeanor may seem small. It's still something that sticks with the individual for their lifetime. However, when we talk about committing a second-degree felony, and you get convicted of that felony, you're a convicted felon for the rest of your life. There is no, well, let me take that moment back. So the decisions that we make have long-lasting implications in that you make a split decision to do something silly. Now I'm talking to children. Make a split decision to do something silly. In that moment, you can't take that back. Even if you try to take that post back, it's already out there. Once a post like that hits social media, people screenshot it, they share it, they do all they can. It just moves on, and it's now out of your hands. So my advice is just don't do it. And there are so many ways that that can ruin your life to be a convicted felon. Ask any convicted felon, and they'll be sure to let you know. They can't vote. They can never purchase a firearm legally. And there's so many things about getting jobs that are held against them because they're convicted felons. Nobody wants to be around them. Nobody wants to take the chance and employ them. Not all. Some turn their lives around, but they have so much baggage that they have to deal with, and sometimes as a result of doing something, and I'll call it like it is, stupid.
How much is this impacting resources that could be devoted to other things?
That's a fair question. I'll speak to last Friday, for example. So there was the post that went out, the email that had gone around saying, you know, I'm so hyped up, I think I'm gonna go shoot up a school or something like that. You guys got that? So in Clay County, we tried to trace down the origin of that, and I told you where that came from, the area that it came from. But to have an officer, a dedicated person at all the schools for that one day during school hours, that was $12,000 of taxpayers' dollars in resources that could have been dedicated to something else. $12,000. I want you to think about that. So when you think about us as an agency and the different law enforcement agencies out there staffing up on every single school day a law enforcement professional, think about the burn rate in tax dollars that would cost. So I want you to be mindful of something else. And I don't want to cause any alarm, but one single school resource officer on a large piece of property such as a high school or junior high school, if something breaks out in that setting, the chances of that individual being right at the right place at the right time, you know, statistically, I would say is highly unlikely. Because a person isn't typically going to come through the front door, look for the school resource officer, and say, hey, I'm getting ready to do something. So there you have it.
On that same thread, Sheriff,
Yes.
would you consider maybe increasing putting more deputies at schools? in light of this?
I would love to have more school resource officers and in the schools. We will, as a sheriff's office, you know, again, last year we applied for a grant to do that. This year we'll apply also for the grant, and I will personally go to Washington, D.C. and go to the office of the person who makes those approvals and ask on behalf of the members of the Clay County Sheriff's Office that we receive the funding to fund up those bodies to have school resource officers in our schools. In addition to that, I would say this. There are folks in the viewing audience who carry guns legally. They have licenses to carry concealed firearms. Now, there has been some discussion here locally in Clay County about allowing certain people to carry those firearms at work. Well, that doesn't fall under the purview of the sheriff. That falls under the purview of that individual's job and what their policies and procedures are that dictate whether or not they can carry firearms, because most agencies don't let their employees carry firearms on duty. But that's a personal choice for that organization. So, you know, I'm a Second Amendment advocate. Don't get it mistaken by any form or fashion that I'm an anti-gun guy, because I love them. And I got sworn in to protect and defend this Constitution, our Constitution of the United States. The Second Amendment just happens to be one of those areas of our Constitution that's getting a lot of attention these days. But I've been protecting and defending the Constitution of the United States since I was 17 years old when I went in the military. And there's so many other folks, not only in our viewing audience, but across this country who have done the same. And our position on that doesn't change. Our Constitution is what separates us from other countries. And the freedoms that we have and that we enjoy here in this country, that's what separates us from other countries. Now, do we have our issues here in America? Of course. But I'd rather live here in America than any other country in the world.
Do you think that teachers who are trained in guns should have guns?
That's a good question. I hope that everybody heard that. The question was, do I think, and I'll take that as the sheriff of Clay County, that teachers who are trained to carry guns and deploy or employ deadly force should carry guns. I'll speak on behalf of the Florida Sheriff's Association, who is entertaining the thought of not only the local law enforcement helping to train the teachers and administrators on the proper use of deadly force and gun safety, but also to that there may be a time in the very near future when state funding is made available for us to do that, and teachers and administrators will be carrying guns in school. A lot of teachers and a lot of administrators have concealed carry licenses to carry, but it's the school board or the superintendent who sets certain parameters. Those things may change in the very near future.
Have you and the superintendent discussed that yet?
We have not discussed that in particular. We have discussed a lot of things concerning the safety and security of the kids here in Clay County. I think we have a strong partnership. We've talked about the school resource officer funding. We've talked about what they contribute to that funding, and you know, we're looking to enhance that relationship and enhance the presence of law enforcement through the school resource officer program.
Today, 40% of students did not show up to school at Oakley High School.
Yes.
40% is a huge number.
That is.
While you investigate these threats, how do you deal with the balance between investigating the threats and also letting parents know that their kids are safe? How do you manage that?
It is a balancing act. And Oakleaf is a neighborhood, that's the neighborhood school in my neighborhood. And to have half the school or nearly half the school body walk out and say, you know, we don't feel safe. If you're looking at the TV right now or you see this in some other format, understand I'm committed as the sheriff to keep you safe at school. And our partnerships that we have, and I hate to sound cliche, but that's all I have, to show you and express to you that I'm committed, and these men and women of the Clay County Sheriff's Office are committed to keeping you safe at school, to keeping you safe when you're not in school, to keep you safe no matter where you are if you're in Clay County. And I think I echo the sentiments of all the sheriffs in the state of Florida when we say, we'll keep our kids safe. We do all that we can. And so now in the near future, with things since Valentine's Day and the events of that day, you'll see an enhancement to law enforcement presence around our schools. And we're going to do everything we can to keep our kids safe. That's always going to be our commitment under this administration. So, last question.
So what goes into tracking down somebody who posts on social media? I mean, can you kind of walk us through the process?
We have a cyber crimes unit, and they work collaboratively with resources from the state agencies and also the federal agencies to do what cyber crimes units do. You know, they reverse engineer these posts, and sometimes these posts go from person to person to person locally, but you can backtrack them to their original source, and sometimes you hit a dead end, and it may hit off of a server in a foreign country, and then you're essentially dead in the water with information. You know, so once we hit that point in the investigation, we go as far as we can. In the meantime, we're leveraging our resources here locally to keep our kids safe. We'll enhance the presence of law enforcement, even when we're still in the process of backtracking that data. And I did see your hand.
Just going off of Oakleaf,
Mhm.
can you give any information on that thread and where it came from, what it said, and if you have any new leads?
Is Chief McKinney back? I'll let Chief McKinney kind of step up towards here and speak to that since his area is investigating that.
At this time, we're still going through that process the sheriff just spoke of, and that does take time sometimes. We have to track back those. A lot of times it's been shared so many times by the time it gets to us, there's a process we have to go through. So at this point, there's really I can't give you a specific on who it was at this point, where it was, where it came from at this point. We do know that they're taking great lengths in a lot of these to hide their movements, and it does take some time to get to, but we've been successful in doing that. Like the sheriff said, we utilize other resources like the FBI, Homeland Security, and they're very helpful in us tracking those back down. But it does take some time, so at this point we don't know exactly where it comes from, but we're still working.
Thanks, Chief.